the more I thought I was in control, the less I got done. And the more that I sort of like turned over to the universe, this thing that I call God, the more I started getting stuff done because I realized I wasn't sort of the ultimate arbitrator of the things that happened in my life.
Hey everyone, this is Kim O'Neill from the Every Day is a New Day podcast and live show, and you're listening to the Going North podcast with the hilarious Dom Brightman. Be sure to subscribe to his show so you don't miss any episodes, and remember, every day is always a new day.
And today on the Going North podcast, we bring you some fabulous humans from across the globe. Today's no different. Be sure to check out the guest stuff in the show notes while you're listening to this wonderful smooth jazz today. And I got to give a big shout out to one of the special K's in my life, the wonderful Kim O'Neill, for this fabulous human right here. This guy right here, the editor and publisher of a well-established the No Traveler series of websites, which celebrated 13 years this past August, baby. This wonderful guy right here publishes several other travel-inspired websites, including the No Hotels and the Forever Bible, which chronicles him and his wife's goal of getting married in 100 countries around the world. 100 countries around the world. My goodness, folks. And not only that, that's just the icing on the cake. He's also written for the Huffington Post, Technorati, the Crichton Review, Travel Age West, and Turkish Airlines, just to name a few. And he also holds a master's in fine arts and creative nonfiction from the Antioch University in LA, where he was also the commencement speaker representing his class. So let's give it up for Mr. DG himself, a fellow D, Devin Galaudet. How you doing today, sir?
it's good to hear your voice, Dominic. What's going on, man?
All the North magic's going on, and my goodness, man, like it's kind of interesting, like, because of course the awesome title, very catchy title of your most recent book, and then the 100 countries getting married in other countries. Like, my goodness, man, it sounds like you lead a really interesting life that needs probably like 3 biographies.
Oh yeah. I would love to say that I came up with it and I'm just a wild go-getter. A lot of the stuff was just like other people inspired me to take action, to do things and to go after things that I wanted. And that's what I did. I don't know if that makes any sense, but I did. And there's this, I'm going to throw this in there. I hope it's okay. But there's sort of like, for me, like at some point I realized the more I thought I was in control, the less I got done. And the more that I sort of like turned over to the universe, this thing that I call God, the more I started getting stuff done because I realized I wasn't sort of the ultimate arbitrator of the things that happened in my life. So I know that's probably a whole head full, but it might be a good starting point for me anyway.
Hey, it's one heck of a good one. It's kind of reminds me of a past guest. She's actually a Christian romance author, Kate Dolan. One of my favorite takeaway lines from her is that control is an illusion.
Yeah, no, I would go with that. And I think that for a really long time certainly during my early adulthood, I thought that if I only did these certain things that I would be in control and I'd always look good and I'd always get it right and my life would be magical and wonderful and perfect and, without any problems and everybody would love me. And that just totally didn't happen. So again, I started kind of turning it over to some other thing, let them be in control, and then I would just do what I could to take action and write. I mean, that's certainly the number one thing for me.
There you go. That's right. No pun intended. Who am I kidding? Most of the puns are intended here, but yes. That's right. The rabbit hole has already begun.
And it's early. And it's early. It's still early yet.
But yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. So that's what I'm talking about. A man who's found faith. So my goodness, what would you file your belief? Is it like a universal truth? Would it be Christian, Buddhist, or?
Oh my God, that's a story within itself. But I'll do the best that I can. So I was the kind of guy that by the time I was 13, I was reading the Bible. I was also reading the Quran, and I was reading the teachings of Lao Tzu. And I would say over the last 35 years, I've done lots and lots of research and study on topics like Kabbalah and Taoism. And today, I would probably say that if there was one thing, I would say that I was a Baha'i in terms of religion. But again, that's also with the understanding that I have a belief and appreciation for everything that came before. I kind of see the world as sort of like every 100, every 500, every 1,000 years, we sort of have a messenger of God come out and say, hey, we as a society, we need to kind of start moving over here and start adding new things to our philosophy of humankind in terms of how we treat each other and how we live our lives to be of service.
I love it. Love it indeed. So, a man who loves to study and live out his life from all those studies. My goodness. Gotta love it.
Well, I will say this. I think what it does for me is it gives me a certain measure of direction. It gives me, I think, a sense of wholeness, and it gives me a sense that I'm participating in sort of in big picture ideas. I think it's very easy, and kind of the way I describe it is there's this path, right? And at some point it splits into two. And I either get to choose the path that has all the Snickers bars, or I get to pick the path with diabetes. And I'm getting these two choices constantly. And sometimes I choose the Snickers bars, but I know that I will feel much better if I'm eating some broccoli too. Does that make sense?
When you threw in the broccoli, it made sense. I'm like, wait a second, aren't Snickers and diabetes the same thing?
Oh, sorry. Yeah, no, that's where I was that was kind of my gaffe. Yeah, no, it's definitely the Snickers bars or the broccoli path. And so I tend to choose the broccoli path wherever possible, but I want to make sure that once in a while I have a Snickers bar. And so that means I try to kind of put out good things into the universe. That means I try to trust that things are happening for a reason and for a purpose. And so even when things happen around me that I don't necessarily like want or like or appreciate, that doesn't mean they don't have relevance and importance. And so I try to have compassion and try to put into the world more peace than anything else.
There we go. That's right. So choose broccoli, have compassion, go for peace, and treat your fellow man with kindness. So is there any other universal truths from all of your decades of study and living that you feel like society has forgotten that we need to kind of put back in the forefront?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I think if there was one thing, I would say that and I can only say this certainly from my personal experience and how I see other people behave and within myself, is that if I have a knee-jerk reaction, it's usually not good. In other words, I may take an idea and run with it based upon my set of feelings in a moment. And really, the more conscious I stay within something, the more likely I'm going to get it right and lead a better life because of it. And I see that happening all the time, that we want to jump to one side or another side. And I think if we keep jumping on sides, we just keep dividing. We put up little walls in between us. And I think that's sort of, again, this is very much a Baha'i idea that really our goal as society, and when I say society, I'm talking about like Earth, that's really about how do we strive towards unity, all of us, right? In other words, I should have my truth and be able to go live my life and enjoy myself, and I want the same for you because you deserve it. And that's true for all of us. And so I think the more we come up with ways that put division in between us, the more likely we're going to continue to have pain and discomfort and dissatisfaction. And, moreover, I think that it's really hard to just sort of say, oh, well, we'll let the government fix it. Because, well, and I hear you chuckling,
Yeah.
because the government doesn't fix it. Do you know what I mean? In other words, they're just like us. They're just as fallible and imperfect as us. And then we cross our fingers like they know some secret thing. And well, they don't. So what that means is that I get to go out into the world in an attempt to do good, right? And attempt to strive towards unity and attempt to support you in whatever your goals are to lead a better life, whether that's including other people or not.
Ah, yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. And it's so true. It's like with all the darn division going around, especially election years of all years in the US of A, where things go a little extra cuckoo and folks think that sprinkles are spikes. It's like, you know what? It's like maybe we should be reminded of, hey, it's like, hey, we're all still human here. We still have to live our lives and still care for our fellow human being. It's like folks are focusing too much on the side dishes and the side chicks as opposed to realizing like, hey, maybe there's some things we can get along with and try to actually work from that perspective of how we can actually grow together, because we're always better together. But the whole divide and conquer thing seems to be at an all-time high nowadays.
I think it is for a lot of people, and I think a lot of that has to do with just sort of the measure of the squeaky wheel. Do you know what I mean? Like sort of like the loudest people that are perhaps on the fringes are sort of the noisiest. But I think there's a lot of people who sort of sort of recognize, but for whatever reason, the facts of their lives, maybe they're working two or three jobs, they don't have the ability to sort of cause the same measure of ruckus. I think there's more of us that are shooting towards sort of like unity and peace than not. But it's just sometimes it's hard to see because we have so much disarray that's going on around us, and that's the stuff that is presented to us as news, is all the chaos and the disarray. So that's why I have to just kind of keep reminding myself in terms of sort of like, okay, yep, it looks pretty nutty out there. My job is to kind of go out there and be of service where I can and remind myself that the ultimate goal is about unity and not picking a side and not picking one thing over another thing or one group of people over another or one ideology over another. Because when we do that, we don't give, listen, there are people who are just simply misguided. And that happens, or maybe they've had bad experiences. And at some point, we have to open a door so that they can find the unity as well. And wow, I wasn't expecting to get all spiritual. Um,
Uh,
so, so I,
Hey, it's all good, man. It's all good. Like, this is the podcast where you get to be you and just you. It's like, hey, especially with the spiritual aspect, because like with certain topics, especially spiritual topics, some people tend to dodge those. And sometimes folks don't have the chance to be themselves. So really, this may be where we need to be. Who knows?
Well, no, I mean, I think certainly it is. And I think that's, ultimately, I think it's a good thing. And it's not even about necessarily individual conception or idea of God per se. I mean, I know people who are atheists and doing the same thing, and people who believe in the cosmic ooze, and people who are believing that there's, space creatures in different societies and different dimensions like Star Trek. And to me, it's sort of like that still falls into the category of that we can still all do this together, and that they're doing it too. It's just, again, it's very easy to start finding the things where we disagree because truthfully, if you and I talk long enough, we'll eventually have that.
Oh yeah, you can say that again. And we know how to be grown-ups about it.
Yeah.
That's the thing people
Yes.
forget. It's like, hey, we can disagree and still live, you don't have to pull out a barbed wire bat and try to hit somebody. Like, it's okay. It's okay. Some people are allergic to tomatoes for a reason. It's okay.
Right.
Back to really what got you to this point with all the religious studies and really just getting the masters and final notes and really having such curiosity, a high curiosity, and just continuing to live your life. So, what led you to the thought of getting married in 100 countries, especially where this is probably the year where a lot of divorces are probably going to happen, enough for a spirit bomb?
Yeah, honestly, yeah. And so I can tell you a little story, right?
Yeah, man.
Okay, so my wife and I got married a number of years ago, and I can't remember, and if she's not listening, then she won't get mad at me later for not knowing. But so I've been in the travel industry for many years, and part of my gig there is also sort of like on a spiritual bent as well. In the No Travel was created with the idea that more Americans, or at least I wanted more Americans to travel around the world to see that we had more in common than not. Because if you turn on the news, the only time you're going to hear about other places frequently is if there's some sort of a disaster. And so I started this website, and I've been doing it now for many years. And so I have done a lot of traveling for that publication. And at the time, right after we had gotten married, my wife and I, were sort of honeymooning at home. But then I had gotten a press trip offer to Mexico. And once they had found out that the folks who had invited me, they said, "Hey, why don't you just bring your wife along as sort of like a congratulations, happy honeymoon sort of thing, and you'll have it here." And so that's what we did. We went down to Puerto Vallarta, which is a charming port town, and we were staying at this Marriott. It was fantastic and beautiful. And at some point, they sort of dropped us into the middle of downtown Puerto Vallarta. And my wife was there, as well as another writer, a woman named Tamalee, who does tips on cooking and lifestyle. She's fantastic and a lot of fun. And we're walking downtown, and we literally pass Our Lady of Guadalupe, which is a 150-year-old a cathedral. And it's charming and it's active, and there's people in there praying at all times. And I totally said it as a goof. I said to my wife, I said, "Hey, why don't we go in there and get married?" And my wife is always game. She doesn't know what the heck I'm doing most of the time, but she's like, "Okay, I'll do this." And so Tamalee turns to me and she goes, "I'm ordained." And I didn't even think about it, but I took off my ring and I said, "Okay, great, you're presiding." And we marched to the front of the cathedral, and there was people in there praying. I mean, it's an active Catholic place. And we marched to the front. Nobody was in the pulpit. And this friend of ours just started talking about life and what her husband meant to her, and these stories about love. And while she was talking, I just remember thinking, I said a lot of things during the vows that I thought were important and relevant, but now I know my wife a little bit more. And I should say those things. I should say these other things, the things that I forgot to say that I should have said. And so I'm still treating this as like just a total goof. And I turned to her and I told her these things. And even though I'm thinking it's a goof, my wife welled up immediately, because what I was saying was, it was true and it was important and she needed to hear it. And Tamalee teared up, and the people who were praying were now on the edges of their seat. And all of a sudden we had this wedding thing going on. And probably within 10 minutes after it finished, it was kind of a short little made up impromptu ceremony. My wife was really elated. Like, not just like, hey, we were married a few weeks ago, but now we've got this different thing going on. It was sort of like we got married then, and now we got married today. And that excitement that she had from the first wedding was now like almost supercharged on wedding number 2. And it wasn't necessarily that it was a legal wedding or not a legal wedding. What it was this like, and I think I realized this as time sort of wore on, is that people get married and then years can go by before you really acknowledge it again. In other words, you know what I mean? You get married and then it's like, oh yeah, but I got to go back to work. Or, oh yeah, maybe we'll make some babies. Oh yeah, life starts over again and we jump back into life together. But that doesn't necessarily mean that people are automatically glued because they were married 15 years ago. So what I've discovered is every time I marry or remarry my wife, and like I said, some of them are like legal weddings and some of them aren't, and I don't really care. It's irrelevant. What's important is that we get to say our vows to each other. I get to retell her what she means to me. I get to articulate why she's important, why I chose her, and why we're doing this together. And what ends up happening, she can't point to some distant past of why and how we got married. What she does is she gets to point to something recent that she knows is real. Like I guarantee you, like my wife and I, you know, we get into arguments, right? I'm not perfect. I am, a matter of fact, deeply flawed. And when we get into arguments, they can only go so far because I'm the guy who's married her 25 times so far. And I've married her in 20 countries, right? We've been married in Mexico a number of times. So that throws off some of the calculation, but we'll keep getting married. And so it's far less about 100 countries, although that's totally cool because I love to travel. But it's also about my wife she can't look at some distant memory about our love because it's all recent. Like we got married, we went to Europe about, well, geez, before the pandemic. We were it's almost a year ago now, in October, and we were there bouncing around. We had friends, and literally, we had a friend of mine had us get married under the giant iron molecule where the 1962 World's Fair was in Brussels, Belgium. And then we got married underneath the Eiffel Tower by one of her good friends. And then we got married by another friend in Madrid, Spain, and sort of like their equivalent to Central Park. And then we got married by another one of my wife's friends in Lisbon, Portugal. And they all are sort of like special and unique. And this way we get to have friends of ours around the world. And sometimes we get married by strangers. And I think it's all part of this sort of like larger tapestry of what our life is together, of all of these places that we visited, and sort of restating how our life together looks. And I think it's incredibly important.
Yeah, you could say that again. My goodness. It's like some one random day on a trip on a whim is like, hey, you know what? Let's get married here. It's a chapel. This will work. And it's a historic chapel. And out of nowhere, you're bringing all the other folks in the chapel to tears of joy and elation and rekindling the spark, or just really adding gasoline to the fire in a way, the relationship fire in a way of really just getting married in different countries. My goodness, man. Like, what? Any ideas on what sparked that idea just out of the blue? Like, were you bored, or was your mind elsewhere? Like, what do you think may have sparked that idea?
Here's the funny thing. I mean, that's the thing where it's like, oh, this is when I'm not in control. Because and this goes to writing. We haven't talked about writing, but I'm going to throw this in there. There's a part of my writing where I'm channeling something. Right? In other words, I write a lot about just mundane stuff. I write about travel. I write about suitcases. I write about the world. And a lot of those things are sort of like, oh, okay, I can look up the dimensions of a suitcase, but the importance of the suitcase and why it's important, it's coming from somewhere else. It's coming from somebody else. It's coming from something else. I don't know what that thing is, but like that idea of to get married over and over around the world, is it my idea? Sure. I'll take claim to that, but did I come up with it? I haven't a clue. What I know is here we were in this great part of the world, just walking around, almost certainly just going to have some great lunch that's going to include a lot of shredded meat, which I freaking love Mexico for that. So we're going to do that thing. And the idea was just this totally random, silly thing. And I didn't understand the importance of it really for a couple weeks later. But I knew in a moment that getting married to my wife the second time, in that moment, I knew that this was important. But it took a little time for me to go, oh, wait, I think I'm onto something here. This is something that needs to, not only do I need to do it like, sure, once in a while, it's like we need to do it all the time. I mean, as much as we can afford to. And for the most part, this is an aside, but if you were to I'm from California, and if you get married in the state of California, you can go to like the courthouse in Norwalk, which is where we got married, like the legal California wedding. I think that costs like $125 or something. My wedding in almost all of those places cost nothing. All of those, I'm not kidding. And we've gotten married in castles. We've got married by the Minister of Culture in an 800-year-old farmhouse in Kayseri, Turkey, where I had my wife come out on a horse, and her horse had its own horse, and they literally opened up the museum to get us traditional wedding clothes, and it was amazing. So what I was going to say is that the California wedding, no joke, like on average is like $45,000, which is crazy money. And
God.
right? No, that's it's not a joke. I mean, because that's just kind of what we've done. We've learned to celebrate this way where it's very expensive. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with it. But I will say that, the wedding that I had in Turkey was just basically, I knew I've got a buddy of mine who's from Turkey. And I was like, dude, I want to do this. And he's like, dude, we'll make it happen. What do you want? And I'm like, I want a horse. He goes, okay, we'll make it happen. And that's what we got, right? We had this incredible wedding. And so you find that from around the world, it's not necessarily about how much money you spend. And I certainly think you should spend something if that's what's part of your culture and what your family wants and all that other good stuff. But it's also very much about what's going to be this memorable experience that is going to be meaningful to my wife. Like personally, do I care about getting married 100 times? Not really. But my wife is ecstatic. She loves it. And it gives her a real sense of foundation in our love life together, because we're in the middle of a pandemic and it sucks. And we've got all kinds of social and societal unrest and changes, and people are having all kinds of crazy feelings. And I can't control what's happening outside of my living room, but I can control what's in it. And so because of that, my wife is like, she knows I'm on her team. She knows I love her. She knows that we're good. So even if out there is the worst, in here is pretty good. And so that's kind of the focus. And this is just some of the stuff that I learned, we keep getting married. And ironically, I've had some friends say to me, dude, you're making me look bad.
Yep.
Which I find hilarious. and I've had a number of other friends say, okay, well, I'll do that too. And they're like, oh, right, it is important. It is important to kind of make this commitment because, listen, there's whatever it is, there's 8 billion people on the planet, and you're going to pick this one person to be on your team, right? This is the team, me and this other person. And so that, like, you're picking the one person. So it better be important. And so I think you just have to keep striving to make it important over and over and over again. And so from that standpoint, and I don't know about you, but I have a ridiculous history of dating. Like, not great. But over time, it got better, and I learned some stuff, and I started paying attention to all of sort of my mistakes and my imperfections and all of that stuff. And so, yeah, no, it's totally, and I highly recommend it. And you can do it on the cheap. Like, you don't have to go to Europe or wherever, you just figure it out. Like, at some point in the near future, I have a friend of mine who's from South Africa, and she's like, listen, I know some people in Zulu Nation, and we're going to give you a traditional Zulu wedding. And I'm like, big thumbs up. And then she's like, then we're going to drive to Lesotho, which is a little mountaintop kingdom that's surrounded by South Africa. And I've been there before. And so, yeah, I want to go to Lesotho and get married. And then we're going to drive to Mozambique and Swaziland, right? So we'll get married 4 times probably in a week. And we get to go explore what is Southern Africa. and it's going to be the bomb. And it's probably not going to cost much.
At least not no 45 grand.
No, right? No, I mean, you.
God dang.
But
That's not even the worst of it.
no, that's median price. That means like that's an average price because they kind of know that if you rent out a restaurant, they're going to charge you, they're going to charge you thousands upon thousands of dollars. The cake is going to cost you thousands of dollars. It's going to cost you hundreds and hundreds of dollars just for some guy to cut the cake and put it onto paper plates for you. Well, if I was throwing the wedding, it would be paper plates. But the china is going to cost some crazy dough too.
Yep.
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 And by the way, not surprisingly, I'm writing a book about where we've gotten married and what it looked like and how I did it and what I've learned from it. Because why not? Because what are we supposed to do as writers? We tell our story, right?
Left. I was messing with you, right?
Right. Or should I say totally? So that's kind of what it is. As a writer, we write about the things that we know and about the things that we understand, and we try to get, we try to get our stories out on paper and our experiences that it might be useful to somebody else. So anyway, again, are we really like we're just talking about all of my faithful, philosophies, which I'm totally good with. I'm totally good about talking about it.
Yeah, man. Why the heck not? Yes, indeed, man. You get to be you. And the most powerful thing, like there's like, well, we kind of alluded to the way with South Africa. So is there any other, I wouldn't say bucket list, but I say dream list locations that you plan on getting married in the future?
Oh yeah, I mean, listen. Again, the reason why I've been sort of like in the travel universe for as long as I have is because I love it. Because I think there's something about going somewhere in the world but you don't know the language and you don't know the culture and you don't know the customs and you may not speak the language and you don't even know where the bathroom is. And you know what? I guarantee you're going to find the bathroom and you're going to find friends and you're going to meet people and you're going to have an experience that you will remember for the rest of your life. So from that standpoint, I totally love it. But to kind of talk about like the specifics of what your question was, like I want to go to places like that nobody goes to. Like I want to go to Papua New Guinea. And I want to, you know what I mean? I think Papua New Guinea, as an example, has something like 70% of the world's flora and fauna that is unique to it. Like you're not going to see it anywhere else but there. And so they have this huge, abundant wildlife and plant life that we just don't see elsewhere in the rest of the world. So Papua New Guinea just sounds to me like, ooh, I need to do that. So I want to do that. And then, of course, I want to go back to places like Iceland and Vanuatu just seems like a really interesting place. I think that is the destination where they had the last known active headhunters, like tribes that were like killing each other and doing that kind of thing. Wow. That's over with. That stopped in the 1970s, I think. But I think it would be amazing to just go see just a different place. You know what I mean? It's a place that people don't go. And I think one of the reasons why I love travel so much, it's very easy for me to think I've got it right and that I know the answers. And then when I travel, the world around me, like that immediate world around me says, well, maybe you're right, but these answers here work too in their own way. And more importantly, I find that like as a human, that I've connected with individual people everywhere I went. And it's been remarkable. I remember paying a guy, I was on a small island off the coast of Malaysia called Redang. And it's not a place where sort of like your average tourist from America is coming. Like no one's going to this place. And so I paid a guy like equivalent to $3 because that's actually like more than what he asked for. And I wanted to go see monkeys. And he's like, dude, this is a terrible idea, but let's go. And so anyway, he's literally with like a machete through this dense forest. We didn't see monkeys, but at some point he's like, "Hey, why don't we just stop at this little place? I know of a place where where we can get an iced tea." And so we sat and got an iced tea, and it was like, I don't know, there was probably 35 kids, and there was probably another 10 women who were with the kids, and they were all wearing hijabs, and it was obviously a very Muslim area in the world. And, I think we have an idea of what Islam looks like around the world. And what ended up happening was we all sat together, and I knew a few words in their language and they knew a few words in English, and we smiled and we laughed and we had this incredible experience. Like, they were excited. They were excited to meet somebody from California, and I was just as excited to meet somebody from Redang Island in Malaysia. And so I think that's kind of what it's all about. Like, I may certainly have a feeling, well, there's some group over here, they're not doing it right. They should do it like me, and then everything would be fixed. And that's never true. Like, they get to do it their way, and they get to have their experience. But more importantly is that I get to have that experience with them, and I get to learn from it and grow from it and hopefully be a better person from it. So all of these pieces start, for me anyway, they all sort of tie together in this connection where we're just part of this greater whole, where we fit together in some sort of a unique way, even if we don't agree on stuff.
That's what I'm talking about right there. And such a powerful example and a powerful story of really why folks should travel more often. So, what do you think is one of the main reasons why people may not travel besides financial reasons?
Oh, well, I hear it all the time. I think it's fear. I think a lot of it has to do with fear. I mean, my mother doesn't travel. It's not her thing. She doesn't want to do it. She's not interested. And I think she probably would have liked to, but there was just always something. There was always some sort of a thing. Like, I remember going to Turkey for the first time, and when I told her, her response was like, "What? Why would you go to Turkey?" Like, she was clearly, she didn't like this idea. And I don't know what image she had in her head, but it was something. She had some idea that it wasn't safe and I wouldn't be liked or something, right? So I go to Turkey, I take a million photos because it's amazing. And I come back and I show her the pictures, and she was like, "Well, it makes me feel uncomfortable when you travel." And I know that to be true because I'm her son and she's supposed to care, and I'm grateful for that. But I heard her, like, somebody called while I was showing her a bunch of pictures, and somebody called and she picks up the phone and she was like, "Oh, my son just got back from Turkey, and wow, it's beautiful there, and wow, the food is great, and all this stuff. I'll call you later." And that, my experience in Turkey, not only enhanced my experience, it also enhanced hers just by hearing about it third hand. You know what I mean? All she did was see some pictures, and she was like, all of a sudden it became this place that wasn't to be freaked out about. And then I think that's what a lot of people do, is that they get freaked out about ideas of, well, what does it mean? Oh, it's going to be expensive. Oh, it's going to be weird. Oh, they're going to rob me. Oh, they're going to take my lunch money. All that kind of stuff. And I think we do that as humans. I think that's like really normal stuff. But when you start traveling, you realize that, again, most people are just like you and I. I mean, maybe we speak a different language. We have a different set of identity and value. But that doesn't mean that we can't have a great time. It doesn't mean we can't have compassion and love and respect for each other. And I think it's just kind of, I remember interviewing a guy. His name legally is the Wizard of New Zealand. And
Oh, wow.
oh yeah, no. And he's this guy, like, I remember reading about him. And then when I traveled there, literally the tourism folks from New Zealand were like, "Well, what do you want to do?" And I'm like, "I want to go meet this guy." And anyway, long story short, he's like a street preacher, and he's hilarious, and he's nutty, nutty as a fruitcake. But this kind of warm, interesting, off the deep end sort of character. And at least he was. I mean, I haven't been to Christ Church in many years, but when I was there, I got to meet this guy, and he gave me a map of the world that he had hand drawn, where he put New Zealand at the top of the map, and of course, everybody else is at the bottom of the map, where south is pointing up, and we sat and talked about stuff, and one of the things he said was, you need to, before you die, you need to backpack. Now, I had already backpacked at this point, but he had said, this is why you need to. And it was a lot of the stuff that I've already talked about. He goes, you're going to arrive from a train, and you've got nothing with you except this pack with whatever, 4 pairs of underpants and a sweater. And that's all you have with you. And you're going through this experience, and you don't know where the bathroom is. You get off in a strange city, and maybe you meet some people, and they get off, and they convince you to go to some place that wasn't on the agenda, and you just roll with it. And you always find the bathroom, and you always find food, and you always find these people. Like, I remember I backpacked through Europe for like 9 months, and I went to all of these places I didn't expect to go, mostly because there were girls. They were like, I would meet some girl in Ireland. She goes, oh, come to Germany, meet me. And then I would go to Germany to meet her, right? Or somebody else who's in Luxembourg or some other place around the world. And I would have these incredible experiences that were just, that changed my life. And it changed the way I saw the world and what was right and wrong within it. And it was just an incredible, remarkable, life expanding experience. And that's what he said. Like he kind of pinpointed this thing. It's like, this is the place where you grow up, is when you're out on your own, where you have no real friends, and you'll make friends. And you're going to go out, and you don't know, you have no money on top of it, because that's sort of the backpacking credo, is just be penniless. And so we did that, and it's like I found cheap places to eat, and I figured it out little by little on my own. It's an incredibly empowering experience if you haven't done it, And is it a little crazy? Yeah. And do you get off at a train station where you can just tell that there's some dudes who are licking their chops, ready to like rob you or pick your pocket or something. And maybe it'll happen and maybe it won't. For the vast majority of people, statistically, it never happens. Most people travel incident free, no problem. You're going to have a great time. And that's, for me, sort of like one of the great gifts that we have. I think Mark Twain, and I'm going to brutalize his quote. He said something to the effect of that those who don't travel are reading the same page of the same book over and over and over again forever. And I hope that wasn't too much of a butchering, but I think that's that idea. It's like I want to expand that horizon to a further place. And it is. There's something about being able to say when somebody says, "Ooh, I wouldn't want to go there," and I've already been there 50 times and can talk about it. I can talk about it. Like, there was a period in time where nobody was going to Mexico because of the violence and all this other stuff. And while all that was happening, I'd gone to Mexico, probably a half a dozen times over that year or so period. Because that's, going to Mexico is not where you get off a plane and then there's like the cartel is waiting to greet you. That's not happening. If I were to show up in some place in Mexico with, 500 pounds of cocaine, along like a trade route where the cartel is, that would be a terrible idea. But if I'm going to, you know what I mean? If I'm going for a little bit of food and listen to some mariachis in San Miguel, man, it's going to be muy tranquilo. In other words, it's going to be really calm. You're going to have a great time because they're not looking for international. They're looking to do their whatever it is that they're doing. And that's not to say that terrible things don't happen, but the likelihood of it happening is the same of you slipping on a bar of soap in your bathroom. So why not have the adventure?
That's what I'm talking about. And then that'll lead you to doing a whole bunch of wonderful writing.
Yeah, absolutely. Then you have a story to tell. And then hopefully you'll inspire somebody else. Because that's what I did. I remember reading a Rick Steves book. Like I was planning on not going anywhere, but it was like I had a garage sale for like 25 cents. So I bought this book and I read it and it was like, by the end of it, it was like, oh my gosh, I need to do this. I need to go bounce around somewhere. And then when I started looking at like airfare, it was like, okay, I could save up a few dollars and do this. And that's what I did. Now my mission is to find unity through traveling and make new friends around the world.
That's what I'm talking about. I already know who to
Yep.
introduce you to after I stop pressing record. And speaking of traveling the world, your most recent book, my God, the title, like 10,000 miles with your dead father's ashes.
Yeah, that is a thing. Basically, my father was a con man. He was a bit of a scumbag. He was, he had a heart of gold. He really did, and he did what he needed to do to get by, and that made him kind of a dubious character. And I loved and idolized him, but I didn't really trust him. And when he died, this is according to his seventh wife, he wanted to return home to Cadiz, Spain, and he wanted to be scattered there, but he wasn't Spanish. And by everything that I know, he had never been to Spain. But I took his ashes there anyway, and then I lost him, which is a whole story within itself. So the story is a little bit about, what do you do when you lose your father's ashes in a foreign country? And it's a little bit about how do you idolize somebody who's a bit of a low life, and how do I become my own person? And then all of this is set in Spain, which is ridiculous. It's a great country. And by the way, I recommend the tapas highly.
Ah, sweet.
Yeah.
Duly noted. That's what I'm talking about.
Yeah, so that's kind of what it's for me. That's sort of the thing is so. But that was 10,000 miles with my dead father's ashes. I think you can still pick it up pretty much anywhere. And again, all of this kind of comes from this idea of just like, okay, universe, you guide me, and I'll just go do it. It was the thing that was like, because I guarantee you, when I started writing, it was like, well, who am I to write? Who am I to even try to tell a story? I had a third grade teacher literally hand back an assignment to me. I was like 10, 8. How old are you when you're in the third grade? I was a little kid. And she handed back an assignment to me and said, you should take a lot of woodshop classes. You're never going to be a writer. And for years, I believed her. And I did. I can fix everything in your house because I was not going to be a writer. And then there was just always this thing inside of me that wanted to tell a story. And so that's what I did. I started, like, I went against, it was almost traumatic. Like, I just have to tell a story. I have to write. And it happened slowly. But it eventually came together. And I had a lot of people encourage me along the way. But a lot of that was like, okay, God, okay, cosmic ooze, okay, universe, I'm not in control here. I'm gonna try and write this story in spite of myself, and I did. And then the person who read it did not say, "Sorry, man, you need to go take more woodshop classes." And so I got better and I practiced, and all of a sudden it became sort of like one of my great loves. And all of this comes back to, okay, I'm not in control of this thing, but I'm going to go take some action and I'm going to stay out of the results. Because that's also one of the bigger things, is that if I'm too emotionally invested in the results of the thing, in other words, oh, I don't want to talk to that girl over on the other side of the room because maybe she'll reject me, and then I'm going to have to throw myself off of a bridge later. And that's like a real thing in the back of my brain. So I had to get rid of that. And even though that hasn't gone away like 100%, that's when it becomes, okay, universe, I'm going to go over there and I'm not going to worry about what the results are. And you get to handle the results. I'm just going to go ahead and take the action. And then, it hasn't gone my way. It's gone not my way a lot. But I eventually, got to go to the other side of the room to go talk to that woman that I eventually married. And I got to write that article that got published, which led to like one of the greatest highs of my life, better than any drug is when you get a letter from a publisher saying, okay, you're on page 39. You know, all of a sudden it was like, wow, what? And so all of those kinds of things. Okay, I'm taking, all I have with me is like $100 cash in this backpack. I don't know what I'm going to do, but I guess I'm going to go take a bus somewhere. And that's what I did. You know, you land somewhere and you go. And all of it was like, terrifying and fantastic and exhilarating.
That's what I'm talking about. And a couple powerful things I noticed from those stories is one, the classic whole wood shop classic goes back to the fact that a lot of popular writers who are bestsellers were always those in school who were told that they were never good at writing and they end up publishing books. And also the fact that your father had 7 wives, and now with the woman that you're currently married to, it's like you're getting married multiple times. So it's almost like you're breaking generational curses in a way.
Well, no, and I think that's actually true. I mean, I think part of the 10,000 Miles with My Dead Father's Ashes, part of that was I was writing that for my daughter. And, if you were to open the front flap, it's dedicated to her. Because I want the buck to stop here for some of that generational nonsense that I learned from my parents and they learned from their parents. I want to give my kid whatever she needs so she can go out into the world and accomplish whatever she wants to do, right? Or at least know that you can just do it. Just go out there, and if you fail, that's fine. You're going to be okay and you'll make it through. And then, of course, on a bigger level, it was like, it's for all of like those people like me. It was all people like me that it was like, I can't walk across the room and ask the girl to dance, or I can't travel, or I can't, all this stuff terrifies me and I'm not going to do anything about it. And then of course, ultimately, the biggest picture is I was just writing it for my like 13-year-old self who was afraid and terrified and didn't know what they wanted out of life. And truthfully, I don't know what I want. Like, I don't know what tomorrow's going to bring. Like, I think we live in an uncertain time in a great many ways. What I do know is that I really do have faith in sort of the process of life, in the process of being human, is that I get to keep going out into the world and find out, even though it's sometimes scary, that it's okay. Like, there's a lot of really wonderful, for every rotten thing that I've seen on TV, there's like a million wonderful things that people are doing all the time, constantly around us. And so part of my job is to make sure I get to see that. Because sometimes one person at the party doesn't say hello to me, and then I think about the one person who didn't say hello, right? Everybody else gave me a hug, but this one guy gave me a stink eye for some reason. Now I'm only going to think about the one guy. Right?
Oh, yeah.
So my job is to keep kind of going out there and going, oh right, there's actually a lot of good people going. There's a lot of goodness, a lot of good people. And I think that's what we need more than anything else. I don't know if you know, there is a bass player, probably the best bass player in the world. And I'm giving you this long description because I'm trying to jog my memory for his name. And I got it. There's a bass player named Victor Wooten he was with Bella Fleck and the Flecktones for years, and I think he probably still is. But he is historically been like one of the best bass players ever. And the stuff he does on bass is remarkable. But when people ask him, how do I become a great bass player? His response is an interesting one. Most of his responses to everything are interesting ones. He says, we don't need more great bass players. We have plenty. You can be a great bass player, but we don't need them. What we need is great people. That's what we need. We need people who are going to go out into the world and do good things. And maybe that's going to happen through music, but maybe not. And maybe my thing is going out in the world and writing good things to inspire others. Or maybe it's just going out into the world and saying, okay, I'm going to go to that crazy place. Yeah, I know it sounds scary on paper, but I'm going anyway. And then I'm going to live to tell you about it. And I'm going to tell you the story, and I'm going to have the experience. And I think that's sort of like, what this is all about is how do you be a good person when you're surrounded by stuff for every reason. I think we have every reason around us to say the world is terrible. I think we have those reasons, right? We can make a list. Here's the list of all the terrible stuff. But I think when we really start making another list of like, what's all the good stuff? Like, who's on my team? People I don't know who've done so many kind things, even getting married. We've gotten married by total abject strangers because I didn't know anybody we were in Montenegro, which is a little tiny country on the Adriatic, right? It's like across from Italy. You've never heard of it. Nobody's ever heard of it. Little tiny country, right? It's near Bosnia and Croatia and Serbia and those places. And so we went there and I didn't know a soul there. And literally we stayed at some hotel and the woman who was checking us in, my wife started telling her the story, and the woman behind the counter got misty. She's like, "Oh my God, that's so romantic. It's the kind of love that I think we want." And I was like, "You need to marry us." And she's like, "My English is terrible. I can't." And I said, "No, that's exactly why you need to." And she literally she burst into tears and ran away. She like ran in another room for like 5 minutes and cried. They were happy tears. And then she came back and she goes, "I don't know what to say." And I said, "Don't worry, you'll say the right thing. I trust you." And so she came back and she said, I have nothing to say. I don't know." And I said, "That's okay. I will make you, I have like a little speech and you read the speech. That's all you do." And she goes, "I can do that." And so this woman who worked at this little hotel in Kotor, which is a walled city, and it's like medieval, it's like Robin Hood. Like going there is like seeing Robin Hood city. And so it's a weird little, it's weird. It's not like anything that we know about here. And so it has all this interesting history. And she married us next to a suit of armor that was sort of like in the doorway of this hotel. And all the women who were the maids, they all stopped what they were doing and they were our witnesses. And they applauded at the end and everybody gave us hugs and it was incredible.
Nice. Did y'all wear the medieval times type of garb too while it was happening?
Not there. Not there. I brought like a suit jacket. My wife brought like a little kind of skinny white dress that you could fold up real small and put it into a suitcase. But when we were in Croatia, they gave us a traditional wedding costume, which is white with sort of like gold, orange, and red stripes around the cuffs. Which is like traditional for them. So she wore that. And then in Turkey, they did that. Ooh. And when we were in San Marino, which is a little dot of a country up on a mountaintop surrounded by Italy, that place, they threw us a medieval wedding where everybody was in this medieval costumes, including us. Like they gave my wife like medieval underwear and medieval like petticoats, and she looked beautiful. And they did her hair, and she had ladies in waiting. And then I was dressed as an Italian nobleman from the 1500s, and they recreated this whole thing in their castles. And like the dude who was like the guy who was playing my wife's father, he was dressed like in chainmail, like from Dungeons and Dragons. And as it turns out, he in real life was like French Foreign Legion and bodyguard to the Pope. And
Wow.
he is a badass. Like I'm Facebook friends with him. And every picture, he's like shooting a bazooka or shooting like, like 9mm and stuff, or slaughtering a pig or something. And he's total guy you would not want to mess with. And he's my buddy now on Facebook. I may never see him again, but like I have this real fond memory that these 50 people, and they danced for us and they sang for us and they performed this wedding where there was this contract that's framed on our, like we have this wall where we framed all of our stuff. We framed this thing, and it's literally a contract, because a traditional contract from the 1500s, a Latin Vulgari wedding, means that I own my wife, but I could trade her for like the equivalent of 20 chickens and 5 goats. She's not going anywhere. I'm going to keep her.
Yeah, definitely the wise choice.
Right? And so we got to have these experiences. And by the way, my wife has a great sense of humor. So she, She laughs about it and tells people that I own her. I don't. Um, she does precisely what she wants. But it's kind of fun that we've had those experiences. And so we had that wedding, and it was sort of like outside in their main castle, and we got married in front of 150 Korean tourists.
Wow.
So, right? So life is good. Life is good. So sometimes you just have to, as scary as it is, you just got to write that book and follow your dreams and fall flat on your face sometimes.
That's what I'm talking about right there. That's what I'm talking about. So speaking of sometimes making a face fall, if you were to wake up tomorrow and you fell on your face metaphorically and you woke up and you're 25 again, but this time in 2020, with all of your amassed knowledge and experience, what advice would you give to yourself?
Oh, yeah. Take it easy, man. It's all bullshit. Most of the stuff that you're going to worry about, and this is me talking to me when I was 25, most of the stuff that I was worried about at 25 never ever came close to actually happening. All the nonsense that I was afraid of, all that stuff about relationships, all that stuff about just the world was a lie. And like, I shouldn't believe it. Like, I guarantee you, there's people, hopefully there's a million people listening to this. And I guarantee you, like you, me, we all have fears. I still have fears. Stuff still wigs me out and freaks me out. And I get scared and stuff like that. But I always have to come back to it's going to be okay. My job's to go out there and to be of service to some other person, sometimes strangers, right? And sometimes I do that. And because people have been service to me, that they don't get anything in return. And to me, a dear friend of mine said a long time ago that love is an action and that action is service. And so there's these two kinds of loves that we can have. And this is me chiming in here. One love is where we make a big deal out of it, right? Like, I'll tell you I love you, but really I want you to tell me that you love me so I can feel love. It's sort of like I'm doing it in order to get something out of it. And that's what I think a lot of the things that we do. And it's easy to fall into that thing. Like, I remember pushing my daughter when she was tiny, tiny, tiny in the truck, not in the truck, but in the cart in the supermarket. And we'd go down the cookie aisle and she'd go crazy. And I would kind of like at some point give her the cookies and like with sort of like, I love you, here are these cookies. But really what I wanted was her just to shut up. So did I love her? Of course I loved her, but was that love? No, not really. That was a negotiation. If I give you these cookies, shut up. When I did stuff for my daughter that wasn't about me getting something in return, you do it because you just love them. Like, you do it because you're not going to get something out of it. And you're not going to get a bunch of people seeing you do a nice thing, right? You're not going to get an attaboy for doing a thing. So that's kind of what I want that's what I want my 25-year-old self to know. It's like, hey man, you're going to get mired in all kinds of ridiculous bullshit, and just recognize that it's bullshit and start young and have a great time and fail, and it's not going to matter. No one's in the big picture. No one is going to care because everybody's caught up in their own stuff, right? So you don't have to worry about what other people think about you. Go out into the world and do the best you can and fail. And it's cool. It's not a zero-sum game. You get to fail 1 billion times. I think I know this to be true, that Abraham Lincoln ran for all kinds of political office and lost every single time except the presidency. And he made a huge difference, right?
Oh, yeah.
Right? So these are incredibly important things. And so I think we just keep trying, and it's okay, we failed. Who cares? Nobody cares that he lost a Senate race before he became president. Nobody. And so that's what we do. Like, all he did was he just kept upping the ante. All right, let's do it. Let's do this other thing instead. Let's run for president. And he went for it, and I love that. And so it's that thing that kind of like in humanity, I have this vast array of people who could have failed, but they just went for it and they didn't. So what if that's me? What if I just keep going for it and it doesn't matter? because it doesn't. So that's my message to my 25-year-old self or anybody else who just needs a kick in the pants. You can do this thing, whatever it is. Like, you know, did you know anything before you started a podcast? Did you know all kinds, like everything there was to know about podcasting?
Oh, hell no. Hell no.
Right. Right? No, you just showed up. Maybe you bought a mic for $30 or something. And then just, okay, I have an internet connection. Let's see let's see how this plays out. And then it's like, okay, I'm going to name my podcast Going North. And here we are. I'm a lucky guy. So by the way, thank you for giving me this opportunity to kind of like talk about writing and talking about love and talking about, I think, things that matter, right? Having a good life, working it out. Let's work out our nonsense. Get it going.
Woohoo! Well, I'm definitely turning that into a social media quote post. Let's work out our nonsense, folks. That's right. Work it out, baby.
Yeah, work it out. Work it out. Well, you know.
That's right. You don't even have to play Marky Mark and the Funky Bunch in the background either. Just work it out somehow.
Well, that's it, man. None of it. You don't have to do it, you know, or you don't have to make yourself crazy. Just try. And if it fails, okay, you know, lick your wounds for a couple days and then call up a good friend or have an ice cream cone and make it the most delicious ice cream cone. And then realize, oh my God, somebody figured out how to make delicious ice cream. That is so cool.
Cooler than 2 cucumbers.
Together. Absolutely.
Oh, yeah. Well, there you have it, folks. My man, baby, the one and only DG himself, Devin Galaudet, baby. That's right. One more time for the folks who want to keep in contact with you. What's the best way, folks, to reach out to you, Devin?
Well, they can find us on In the No Bride. You can also find, if there's going to be notes with my name, devingallaudet.com is probably the best way to get in touch with me. And, you know, I'm always happy to talk about writing. I am on social media. I despise it, but it's one of those sort of like a necessary evil, I suppose. And it allows me to meet new and interesting people around the world all the time. And I think that's just totally cool. So that part's fantastic. So yeah, I'd love to hear from you.
There you have it, folks. Follow him on all the social media posts and look out for that brand new book that's going to be coming out in the future about his marriages. My goodness, he's 20 out of 100, right?
25 out of 100. And we would have gotten married more, but obviously, you know, the universe is what it is. So I think, you know, for most of us, we just need to kind of cool our jets and hang around here for a while. But that's going to change again. And when it does, you know, I think we have either a ticket to South America, where we do Uruguay, Argentina, and maybe Chile, or we'll do maybe South Africa and hit those countries that I mentioned before, because the world is fantastic.
Oh, yeah, with a capital F. That's what I'm talking about. Woohoo! Yes, indeed. Well, definitely keep on the lookout for that. Looking forward to it. Definitely want to snag my copy of the magical book of the 10,000 miles that your dead father's ashes, because it sounds like a powerful story indeed. So any parting words to the folks still listening, Devin?
No, you know, be nice to each other, be kind to yourself also, because none of us do this perfectly. You know, I fell on my face and made some big mistakes. And then, you know, we have another day to try to fix it. So keep living and enjoying life.
How's it going, you super special, awesome human? Since you made it to the end of this episode, it looks like you really enjoyed yourself. Since you enjoyed this episode, be sure to share it with at least 3 people in your network and tell them what you really liked about this episode. Heck, even shoot myself or the guest an email and let them know what you liked most about this interview, so that way they can stay inspired to keep pushing out great work.